For those looking for a liberatory martial arts learning approach and curriculum, we've created Liberation Martial Arts. It doesn't just teach you martial arts, it's also a radical and alternative approach to learning. Thanks to Tomo H., Philip, Dwayne Hogan, Renee, and Danielle for signing up. Sign up for Liberation Martial Arts at the Southpaw Pod Patreon. This will give you access to bonus content, transcripts, and uncut versions of our shows without breaks or interruptions. Sponsors also get a monthly training session with me. If you prefer to support others, your sponsorship can go to the training of an organizer instead. There's also ways to make one-time contributions. Find all our links at southpawpod.com. This is Sam.
And this is Fight Study.
We are discussing UFC 323, Dvalishvili versus Yan 2. Today, I am joined by two other LMAists. I have Jessica back again.
Hi.
And I also have Michael, a freelance MMA writer.
Well, hello, everyone. Yep, I write about MMA as well as kickboxing, but yeah, right now it's MMA for the most part. I'm glad to be here.
There's only actually a few fights we wanted to talk about for this. Let's talk about Merab Dvalishvili versus Peter Yan. This is the second time they're fighting. Merab Dvalishvili is the bantamweight champion going into this fight. It seemed like Merab was the bantamweight GOAT, just couldn't be beat. And so it was one of those matches, not even this match. Whenever he's fighting, the most interesting thing is, can anybody beat him? Because he looks so dominant. And then when we finally saw it happen, we're like, okay, that's what you need to do. You need to kind of have the fight of your life to beat Dvalishvili. So let's start with you, Michael. What were your thoughts and impressions about this fight?
Well, this fight was really surprising to me. Like you said, I didn't think anyone could beat Merab. I didn't think anyone in the bantamweight division, at least, could beat Merab. And it was really surprising to me, but I got to give credit where credit is due. Dan Tom, he's been a guest on your show, and he actually, I believe he picked Yan to win this time, given that in their first fight, apparently Peter Yan had a right hand or right shoulder injury, and that prevented him from pretty much throwing his right hand the entire fight. And as we saw in this fight, he nailed him with not just his right hand, but also his left hand. And I just thought it was really impressive, personally, how Peter was able to stay safe while, with a high guard, while using 4-ounce gloves. I know that, people tend to rely on head movement and have lower hands, especially if they're going up against a grappler. You want those low hands typically to, dig underhooks more easily. And but he likes to employ that sort of higher guard, sort of that Soviet style of boxing, with a long guard, but also like a really high guard. And, he kept himself safe for the most part from strikes. I mean, he definitely did get hit, but he would roll with the punches or he'd partially block them. And he would use his elbows to help, prevent Merab from getting in on his hit. But he did get taken down a couple times. But he was able to, gain composure. It seemed like he was breathing really well. And he was able to react to those takedowns and, scramble with Merab and regain his composure and get, a dominant position himself. And he even showed his own offensive wrestling, which I think is huge, especially if you come from a striking background and you're going to be doing, mixed martial arts. It's probably best to, mix the martial arts. I don't know, maybe it's a good idea. It seemed like Yan had the answer this time. And a big part of the answer was, having better health, having a right hand that worked. And yeah, it was really, really impressive from Jan. Um, I was surprised that Marab actually wanted to fight for the fourth time in the calendar year. That's actually something that's never been done before. No one has ever defended their title, I believe, four times in a calendar year. So, I think trying to cut weight multiple times a year, and especially the way he does it, he claims that he does it like the old school way, which is just a lot of dehydration. And to top that off, he also like spars on the day of his fight, like the morning of the fight, which is, that's a choice. But I think partially, credit to Jan still, but I think partially it also has to do with, Marab kind of tiring himself out. And, that could be attributed to the UFC needing people to fill in these pay-per-view spots. I know some people in the Discord community for Southpaw were saying, we're like surprised that Marab was fighting again. They're like, wait, didn't he just fight like a month ago or like 2 months ago? And yeah, he did. But he chose to fight again because, the UFC needed some bodies there to keep the machine going. And he even said it himself after his loss. He said, I'm a good company man. And I mean, I guess he proved it that, he's willing to take on a fight, even if, is very possible that he could lose and get badly hurt. But yeah, end of the day though, credit to Computer Yan for sticking in there and, learning from his first fight.
Marab's nickname is the Machine. And so maybe like to your point, right? So many fights this year, title fights. So they're all scheduled for 5 rounds. Maybe the Machine was redlining going into this. And on top of that, Jan was like peaking. And I think a lot of credit has to go to his team. I don't know if he's using the same team, but they must have really put together a good game plan because you have to, I think, to beat somebody as dominant as Dvalishvili. And this time, Jan actually stuck to the plan because sometimes he is known to go off the plan and like get himself in trouble or get himself in foul trouble. But this time, he really seemed to like have a game plan and just stick to it every round. So I think, yeah, all of that goes into it. Jan came into this really prepared, and then maybe Dvalishvili came into this kind of burned out, though, because he takes such pride in never getting tired and always being in peak shape. Maybe he can never admit that either. Jessica, what were your impressions of this fight?
Just seemed very impressive. Like, I think even the first round, like the way Jan was kind of like checking all of like Dvalishvili's like leg kicks, and he didn't really like back up. And he even like stuck his like jabs. Like Marab was moving back when Jan jabbed him every time. And I think it's like very clear that like Jan has like a very like sophisticated like stand-up clinch system, like for his takedowns, and it's like striking too. So like Marab kind of has this like kind of like a simple like 1-2, 1-1-2, and then he'll go for like a single or try to dump or a double. And then once Jan like kind of stuck all the takedowns and like stood up with all the mat returns, then Jan is just a way more advanced striker than Marab.
I think a lot of the elements that Sandhagen was employing in his game plan showed up here, except Jan hits a lot harder than Sandhagen. So that was the problem Sandhagen had, was when he got back to the feet, he just couldn't hurt Dvalishvili, whereas Jan can. A lot of people get up from Dvalishvili by giving up their back. And on top of that, Dvalishvili also tries to get to the back body lock. So something Jan did was like he started elbowing Dvalishvili's forearm. And you see Dvalishvili like grabbing his arms as he goes back to the corner in multiple rounds because that arm is bothering him. So I think that did pay dividends. I think the way he uses high guard is kind of like an interesting way he defends takedowns. When they shoot, he keeps his hands up in a high guard, but then he ducks with them, and then he uses his forearms to stuff the grab. So that was interesting as well, that kind of usage. He uses a very stiff jab, and then he has one arm back, and then sometimes he would duck. And that arm in the back that he uses as his high guard, he also uses to wedge against Dvalishvili so he can't get to his legs. So it was a interesting tactic. I think a lot of other people in the past used just sprawls and double underhooks. And Jan did that too in this fight too. He sprawled, used double underhooks. He sprawled and grabbed body lock from north-south. He also shot his own takedowns. So I think there was just a lot for Dvalishvili to compute. Like, I think Jan was putting out more diversity than Dvalishvili. So I think that was another advantage.
I also thought, if I could chime in, I just found it really interesting how, to Jessica's point, how Jan was playing with those ranges, but he would also not be afraid to be like right there in the pocket. I mean, typically when you watch like a boxing match, there are some fighters that are not afraid to be, right there in front of you. But with MMA, there's a whole clinch to worry about. There's takedowns to worry about. But it seemed like Jan wasn't really worried about that at all, or he was at least prepared for those to come his way. So he stayed in Merab's face the whole time. And, people always talk about how if you're facing like a grappler, you should have them on the back foot. But like rarely ever happens, really. Like maybe people will employ that strategy for like the first 2 minutes of the fight or for the first 2 minutes of a round. And then they end up like, backing up a lot. And then the grappler goes downhill and starts to get their takedowns. But Jan seemed really, really consistent in staying on his front foot. And even if he did back up from like strikes or from takedowns, he would circle. He wouldn't back up too linearly, and if he did get caught in the clinch, he made sure to exit at an angle and not just, go backwards and get pressed up against the fence. So that's something that I saw, or at least remembered from that fight as well.
I think there are a couple exchanges in the pocket where it's very clear that like Jan like saw everything. Like you, sometimes when like a striker's like under duress and they're kind of just like rushing and trying to catch someone, you'll kind of see them kind of like swipe or paw or even do like a weird like back fist because it's like they're trying to punch where like the last saw your head, but they don't have any reads. When really like an advanced striker with their reads, they're going to punch where your head is going to be by the time your hand lands. So Merab was just whiffing the whole time, and like Jan like was like really accurate and he was like hitting harder because he got all of his reads and he could see everything, whereas Merab was just flustered and was just trying to throw whatever.
Yeah, to that point, a good striker, as they go on, their striking gets better because they get more reads, more information. Whereas Merab had his best striking in the first minute and then his striking got worse, which speaks to Jessica's point that maybe he strikes well because he's just kind of striking without making reads. And then when you should be getting better because you're making reads, if you're not making reads, your striking is going to get worse. There's two Dvalishvilis. His striking, his takedowns, his guillotines are much better when he's winning. All of those things, when he's losing, they don't work nearly as effectively. And also his opponents, if they're doing well, they're not nearly as tired. But if they're getting beaten up and they're losing, then they're getting way more tired. So I think that also played into it. Once Jan started feeling like he's winning and he's taking over, his confidence grew. So his cardio got better. Merab couldn't rely on his opponent starting to diminish from the pressure. I think also, to Michael's point, another reason why he was so effective at defending the takedowns is because even though Dvalishvili's punches look wild and looping, the wildness and the loopingness serve a purpose because they're so big. Big movements look scary and powerful. So it forces fighters to like move back even further because they don't want to get hit by a haymaker. So because they start moving back further and further, that's how he sets up the takedowns. He needs you kind of running backwards to get those takedowns, or he needs you to overswing at him. Then he drops down and gets you. And those are things Jan didn't do. He didn't overswing. He just swung stiff, but he didn't overswing. And when he was going backwards, kind of like Valentina Shevchenko, he just took small steps back. He didn't start running backwards to avoid those punches because Jan started seeing those punches coming. He didn't see them coming in the first minute, but then once he started to, he just kind of like leaned back and barely gave up ground. So a lot of those things didn't create the environment for Dvalishvili to get those takedowns. Like Dvalishvili is a very good takedown artist for MMA if he creates these situations that favor him. But in this fight, what we saw was when he doesn't have those situations, he's not nearly the same wrestler and not nearly the same fighter.
Yeah, in round 3, you started to see Jan like introducing the body kick too. Yeah, like that was a point where Merab's like takedown threat was like pretty effectively neutralized. Like he was only had like the 1-2 really, so he was starting to get open to the body. Jan hits hard, so he almost dropped in probably like 3 times in this fight.
I think to your point, right? Like when you're throwing big haymakers, it leaves your side open to get caught with body punches or kicks. And I think something you said during the fight was like, I didn't realize that Dvalishvili's defense, striking defense, is all offense. But as far as like checking kicks or like, whether you're Dutch blocking body kicks or like tucking your elbows or like doing Thai style, bringing your leg up to block it, he doesn't really do any of those things. He didn't really have to ever worry about those things if he's putting the offense on. But when he has to actually just stand there and defend, he doesn't defend that well.
Screamed audibly too when he got hit with those left body kicks. It looked really rough.
It doesn't look good to judges when you're screaming when you're getting hit.
No.
So to kind of add on to how like Merab's defense is his offense, it's not just also like to kind of just like swing back, but it's also to just launch a takedown right away. So Merab's takedowns I saw were getting really sloppy, like he shot in really far away. I think it was in response to that, like those stiff jabs. So he was forced to shoot takedowns because he couldn't get past the jab. But then if you're shooting at the end of his jab, then it's going to be real easy to see and stuff. I think what I noticed at the beginning of round 5, I think I got the impression the adjustments is that his corner told him Merab had to actually kickbox in this fight. So you kind of see him like he can't just stand in front of him. He can't just kind of just go in and get hit. Like you kind of see him try to be in and out and try to incorporate more kicks and more striking diversity. But I mean, Merab was like respecting like Jan on the feet. Like at the start of the round, you saw them like go immediately to the center, but then you immediately saw Merab like step back and circle around. So yeah, Merab was starting to hit Jan more. But then kind of Merab was on the back foot, so Jan kind of reversed the dynamic. Like Jan was pressing forward and he took him down.
Yeah, I think to your point, it seems like somewhere the psychological advantage flipped. Dvalishvili was the one who was intimidated by Jan because he was probably like hurt by him. And when you get hurt by somebody over and over, because a lot of it looked like Jan was just using him as a punching bag. And so at that point, he's like, oh, I don't want to get hurt by this guy. And then you move in a way where you don't want to get hurt. And that's when you started seeing like what looked like a tired Dvalishvili. The other thing also is historically, Dvalishvili has gotten out wrestled and had his takedown stuffed in fights before. This wasn't the first time. It was just a long time ago. It happened against a very limited striker in Frankie Saenz. It happened against Ricky Simone because Dvalishvili is somebody who learned wrestling later. He's a judo person. But what made him seem so unbeatable is he has such a knack and such a cardiovascular system that allowed him to create these situations that favored him. So it's more like he created an environment where it made it really hard to beat him. And so how was somebody going to stop that environment? Stop him from like creating that Dvalishvili landscape? And Jan did it by having like a long guard, a stiff jab, and level changing with them. Instead of sprawling or using underhooks, he just level changed with them. Also, he hits damn hard, and Jan is really well-rounded, and Jan is the former champion. In a lot of ways, Jan could have held that title for a lot longer in another universe. As far as his skill goes, maybe he should have stayed champion for a lot longer, but that's not what happened. And then when he lost the title to Aljo because of an illegal knee, on his way back to the title shot, he had a fight with Sean O'Malley. And many people thought he won, but he didn't win. The judges gave it to O'Malley. So in another universe, he should have won that fight. So because of those kind of things, it made him look more of an underdog than maybe he should have been. And especially because when he fought Dvalishvili the first time, he was fighting Dvalishvili, to Michael's point, with an injury. So all those kind of little things made us underestimate Jan, when maybe he had the championship medal to beat Dvalishvili all along. It's just that these circumstances happened, and the circumstances that made Dvalishvili look so unbeatable, all of those combined made it seem like Dvalishvili should win this fight like he wins all the other fights. So I think a part of it is Dvalishvili is overtired, fought a lot this year, and a lot of people, including probably Dvalishvili, underestimated Jan.
Peter Yan definitely clawed his way back up to the top. I think, like you said, he was going through a really rough patch after that loss to Aljamain Sterling. And it was honestly looking like he wouldn't get back to the championship after I think he suffered like 3 losses. But then he strung together some really good wins against some pretty impressive opponents. I think it was Song Yadong and Davison Figueiredo and McGee. Those wins were like really impressive. I mean, he dominated in his vintage fashion. And I also forgot that I actually didn't realize that Peter Yan is actually younger than Dvalishvili, but it feels like he's been fighting for so long, right? And that to see him kind of climb back up to that top spot is pretty impressive. And I feel like not super common, but maybe it is common now. You know, we see Alexander Volkanovski go back up to his championship status. It feels like it's 2022 all over again. Who knows? Maybe like Israel Adesanya is gonna become champion again. We don't know. You know, MMA is a very volatile sport, not even just within the fight, but just, you know, when it comes to emotion and when it comes to, you know, who gets a title shot and for what reason. It can be very like political, and
also the divisions aren't as deep as they would like you to think. So it could just be like a couple of people are injured or something happens to a couple of people, or a couple of people like change divisions or retire, and boom, you got a title shot again. All right, now let's move on to a flyweight fight. Alexandre Pantoja versus Joshua Van for the flyweight title. Pantoja, kind of like Dvalishvili, seemed like an unstoppable champion even before he got the title. He cleared out the division and then he got the title shot. And so if you look at his run to the title and then his title defenses, it's like he beat everybody. So it was like, how was he going to lose the title? Was Van the person to do it? And then Jessica was like, oh, yeah, basically the only way Pantoja loses is he hurts himself. And that's kind of what happened. So it lasted 26 seconds. He lost the title due to injury. It was a freak accident, but it was caused by Van. Basically, he TKO'd him. He got kicked in the head, and then he shucked it off, and then that happened. Michael, with you, what did you think about that accident? How did you feel? Because Pantoja's such a dog. He's probably like the biggest dog, like just such a blood and guts fighter. Like, it's hard not to root for his style because he fights every fight like an underdog for some reason. He fights like Rocky, just like it's all grit. And so it's just like impressive to watch him fight. Part of that is like thinking like this guy's like indestructible. He's like so durable. And then in that moment, he looked very fragile. A note to our listeners. If you love the Southpaw Project, please support us and help us get paid for our labor by financially supporting us on Patreon. This will give you access to exclusive bonus content, like transcripts, early releases of Southpaw Deep Space Nine, our fictional narrative podcast, Fighters Brew, break-free versions of our shows without interruptions like you're hearing now, bonus articles, Fighters Brew transcripts with extra content, Liberation Martial Arts Online, as well as our private chat group on Discord. You can find all pertinent links at southpawpod.com. So, Michael, as a writer, what did you think?
I mean, before as a writer, I'm a Southeast Asian. So to see Van win that title, I was just over the moon, to be honest. I mean, I feel really bad for Pantoja, but I was just, celebrating because it was like, this guy won. This guy, he's like, kind of looks like me, and we have like a similar family background. I was just so ecstatic for him, and I know that he worked so hard to get to that title shot. But yeah, I was still very gutted for Pantoja, and I was also really disappointed that we couldn't see both of them, fight. I thought it would be a really interesting fight. I did think Pantoja would win it, but I thought it could be competitive. And I mean, as we just talked about with the Merab and Peter Yan fight, it's not it's not a surefire. It's not completely written in stone that the grappler is always going to win, right? Van is incredibly good at takedown defense, and he's super active. He fights like every other month, it feels like. I think before his number one contender fight, he had fought 3 or 2 weeks prior. So this guy is super active. He's really young. He caught a head kick with his head. I mean, who does that, right? But that's actually, it's funny that you say, he kind of just ate that head kick. But I think in Sanda, which I trained for like about a year, people actually catch head kicks like similar to that. And, if it doesn't knock them out, then they just use that leg sitting on top of their shoulder as like a means to get a single leg takedown, basically. And credit to Van, he caused that injury to happen. I mean, I'm sure he probably didn't predict that Pantoja's elbow or his shoulder would snap like that, but I mean, he did cause it. It's like when Weidman defended a kick from Anderson Silva all those years ago. He probably didn't think that his shin would snap in half, but I mean, he technically caused it, and so that's a technical knockout. That's why it's called a technical knockout. Um, so yeah, I mean, credit to Van where that's due, but I do feel very gutted for Pantoja. I hope he, comes back, but I don't know how possible that is with an injury that bad. It might be out for like a year and a half at least, right?
It's not just elbow, it's elbow and shoulder.
Yeah, it's the whole kinetic chain is just busted now, and he's got to rehabilitate that. I mean, he's got to fix that first, and then he's got to rehabilitate it. And I mean, we all know how injuries can be. We all of us here train, so I hope he can find some healing in there. I don't know. Maybe he'll make a run again in the future. You never know. But at 30, how old is he? Like 36 years old? And it's looking sort of bleak for Team Pantoja, but rooting for him. He's a great, great fighter.
I guess it's not even just about feeling bad for Pantoja. For us as fans of MMA, we just didn't get to see the fight that we wanted to see. We were like, the fight's starting and then it ended, right? And it wasn't ending like by a punch knockout, which is what you would expect from Van, who's such a powerful hitter. It just ended because of a freak injury, which Van did cause. And so I think that's what was disappointing for all of us, is we didn't get to see the fight that we wanted to see. But credit to Van, he made history, represented his people, made history by fighting so often, going into that fight, beating the champion that he did beat. Jessica, what did you think?
Well, I mean, it was kind of weird because I think I know just like elbow was still kind of like bent. It wasn't like hyperextend. It wasn't like hyperextending forward. It just looked like his whole entire like humerus just shifted completely over his own forearm. Like I think maybe like kind of his bone just broke. It just shattered.
Yeah.
And then that's what allowed that elbow to just like completely fall out.
Because usually the old adage is like, don't lock out your hands when you're falling, when you're posting like that. But he didn't. He bent the elbow, right? And then some people are like, no, he shouldn't have like put his hands down on the ground at all, right? He should have just like, I don't know, fallen down. But people don't understand why you have to put your hand down. If it's not your hand, it's your face. Something's going to hit the ground. He put his hand down so his head wouldn't collide with the ground. So it's like, yeah, destroying your arm is bad, but then like landing on your head and breaking your neck possibly is like worse than breaking your arm. If I had the choice of breaking my neck or breaking my arm, I'm going to choose breaking my arm. So he did do the right thing. You should be posting on something other than your head. The way that Van launched them, he was about to get spiked on his head. So yeah, he put his hand down so he wouldn't get spiked and he wanted to roll through. That's why he bent his elbow. So that's what was so scary for me as somebody who like trains and wrestles and does these things. It's like Daniel Cormier said it himself. Like that's a move wrestlers do all the time. It's not like something he did wrong. That's like the right way you're supposed to do it. But that's the thing. Like some people think you do the quote unquote correct technique and that ensures safety, but it doesn't. Fighting, even sparring, is a high risk activity, even when you do everything correctly. Even when you do everything right, there's still a risk of injury, of bad injury. It's a non-zero chance that you will get injured, even when you do everything right. So people think, oh, perfect technique, you do everything right. Everything my coach said, if you do that, you won't get hurt. It's like, unfortunately, whether it's self-defense or proper technique, no one can guarantee your safety. Bad things just can't happen. Yes, doing everything right reduces the risk of injury, but does not guarantee that you will never get injured. I know a lot of people who are like perfect technicians who did everything right. I've seen it in the gym. You look at it and you're like, I don't know how somebody got injured because everything looks so clean and proper, but something happened. Because the body is in a lot of ways very durable and the body is also very fragile. And on top of that, Pantoja has just been fighting a lot and has been training a lot his whole life. And so it's not like a fresh body that got injured. It's a body that's already kind of worn down. And especially the way he fought, he was so blood and guts. So it's like, yeah, sometimes it's just like you are like a tank until one day you just start falling apart. And we kind of saw that. It's like, a fighter like Chuck Liddell, who seemed like he had an iron head. And then one day that chin just fell apart and just a glancing blow would just knock him out. So sometimes it happens slowly and sometimes it happens all at once. And we just didn't see that with Pantoja's chin. Instead, we just saw it with his body.
Yeah, to your point, Sam, I think his blood and guts style, going really hard on the cardio and pressuring his opponents like that probably did cause him to have some injuries that we don't know about. And I also know that he wanted to chase Demetrius Johnson's record. I believe it's 11 consecutive title defenses. And he verbally confirmed that he wants to chase that record. And he was saying, if I fight at least 2 to 3 times per year, I can catch that record in like 2 or 3 years. But as we saw with the Merab fight too, durability and making sure you're healthy, that's like probably the biggest but most underappreciated or most overlooked aspect of fighting, and this is like such a chaotic sport. We're literally throwing limbs around and hoping we hurt each other. That's gonna happen. Like freak accidents like this are bound to happen for sure. But it will also be caused because of the human body is not invincible. As much as like we like to think that these professional fighters are invincible, they're not. They're human beings, and they're definitely durable for sure, especially when they're young. But at a certain point, they have to come face to face with reality. And none of us are ever like not disabled, right? We're just not yet disabled. But eventually, we'll all break down at some point.
All right, now let's discuss the flyweight fight between Brandon Moreno, who is the former champion, versus Tatsuro Taira, who's part of what I call the Japanese flyweight vanguard, where there's Taira, there's Asakura, and now Horiguchi. And all of them are now probably next in line for Van's title. So even if Pantoja comes back and gets an immediate title shot, who knows who the title might be held by? It might be Van. It might be one of the members of the Japanese vanguard, as I'm calling them. So the flyweight division is completely up in the air now. But in this fight, Brandon Moreno was finished by Taira in round 2 from punches in the most dominant fashion. Taira on his back, flattening him out and smashing him with punches. So, Michael, what did you think about this fight? Did it surprise you at all?
I don't think I was too surprised by this fight. I think that Moreno has, he's still very good. Don't get me wrong, but he's definitely had some growing pains, if I can call it that, or he just had some bumps in the road recently. Um, ever since he lost his title to Pantoja, he's kind of been not on a downward spiral, not on a downhill, but he's been battling his way uphill, and he's kind of trying to do like what Peter Yan has accomplished, right? Is like coming back from a really difficult defeat, losing championship belt and trying to make his way back up to the mountaintop. But when you got a really young prospect that has solid grappling and solid biomechanics, I guess you could say, in Taira, it's going to be a really, really uphill battle. And Tatsuro was super composed. He did go through some difficulty in that first round. And I know Joe Rogan thought that, Moreno had some sort of triangle locked up, but I don't think that was really giving Taira any threat of being submitted. I think if anything, that was just holding him down, similar to like a full guard would keep you locked up. Obviously, he had his head and his arm isolated in that lock, but I don't think Moreno had the choking mechanics, lined up. Eventually, Taira popped out. It was like towards the end of that first round. But yeah, a lot of people thought that, that the stoppage was too soon, when Taira had Brandon Moreno flattened out and was throwing, I counted 8 unanswered ground and pound shots. But people were saying, oh no, let him be a warrior, let him go out on his shield. I was just like, what? Okay. Well, no, because I didn't see him, coming back from that. I think if anything, the referee saved him from even worse damage. Yeah, I wasn't super surprised. I thought Taira has what it takes to become champion. And, if he's going to be up next with, with Pantoja out, if he's going to fight Joshua Van, I'm excited to see that fight. I mean, I think it's really interesting stylistic matchup. I don't know if Taira might have to do a rematch with Royval. But yeah, like you said, the Japanese Vanguard, they're coming.
And to an earlier point you made about Peter Yan, Moreno in this fight, he had that kind of style where he's like crouched to defend the takedowns. And so Moreno had more of that classic stance that a lot of MMA fighters use when they're fighting a grappler. They're kind of low, already ready to sprawl. And so that's what we saw with Moreno. And we saw that in effect in round 1, where he used that stance to get to a sprawl really quickly. And that's what caused that scramble that ended up in that position where I think Moreno didn't think he had the choke. He just thought, if I hold on to this, I win this round just by points. And so I think it was like a little bit of like experience on his part where he's like, if I just hold on to this. But the thing was, like, when he got up and the round was ending, like his legs were locked up. He couldn't bend his knees. He was like walking like stilts. So I think there was a price to pay for his legs. And I wonder if that affected his movement in round 2, because if you look at the way he got taken down, it was like an outside trip where his legs were fully locked out, like he was on stilts again. And then he fell right back into mount. If round 1 is a battle, then you did win the battle, but did that actually cost you the war because like your legs just were so stiff afterward? Jessica, what did you think?
I think it's kind of clear that like Taira's striking to me hasn't improved much, or at least his vision. Like you just see him like whiffing all of his punches. I mean, even after that, kind of he was stuck in that triangle and he ended up escaping. In the corner, like the translators like were saying like, oh, like just stay calm. So I think that like Taira gets kind of like nervous pretty easily. So I think that might be what's affecting his like striking acuity and accuracy. But when he grabs a hold of you, then it's kind of his world.
Their dimensions as far as like what the tail of the tape showed were like similar. But when you see them after they've rehydrated, Tyra just looks like the bigger person. So he just must have a lot of that kind of wrestling, squeezing strength. And he just is a big person at flyweight. To Jessica's point, Tyra isn't like the best striker, but like, man, Tyra is durable. He's shown in so many of his fights, he could take a lot of punches and just kind of weather that. And there's a bunch of fights where he's like getting outstruck, beaten up, and then he gets a takedown, and then that's it. It's all he needed to get a submission or ride the back and win that way. So against a really good striker, like, will he get pieced up again? That could happen, you know? There's nothing in this fight that showed like that couldn't happen. But at the same time, even if that happens, he also showed again, all he needs is like one takedown and he could just get it done or just win that round through that takedown because his grappling is that dominant.
I think it's notable that like the dominant flyweight champions or the contenders all have extremely like effective back control. Like Pantoja has a killer back control and has finishing options. Tyra has probably like I think the best back control yet. I think Jan, when he fought Sterling, the big issue against Sterling was that Sterling had really dominant back control with a body triangle. I think Tyra has to be able to finish from the back. It's not like kind of like Merab's like loose back control or mat returns. He gets hit way too much. He can't afford to like not get anything big off of his grappling exchanges or back takes.
And let me point out that when he finished Moreno, he was already hitting him. And then the last two punches dropped Moreno, where he was like building his base back up. And then boom, boom. And then he just collapsed face first onto the ground. And then Tyra was hitting him more. And then the ref jumped in. That's why. It wasn't like Moreno was building his base. Tyra's like punching him. And then they stopped it. It's like he's building his base. Then all of a sudden he went limp and fell down. And that's why the fight was stopped. So I think Tyra is just incredibly strong from the back and he hits incredibly strong from that position. He misses, but when he lands, especially when he has you pinned down and then he starts hitting you, he has really, really mean ground and pound. And that's also something interesting because a lot of fighters, when they take the back, they don't look for ground and pound. They look for the choke. Or when they get them down, they don't like really hurt their opponent. Whereas Tyra, to Jessica's point, has a sense of urgency where it's like, I get hit way too much standing. So down here, I'm going to finish it. I think his ability to punch from ground and pound is much better than his ability to punch from standing.
His ground and pound is like really accurate. Like I said, he landed 8 punches like unanswered and undefended by Brandon Moreno. And also he tends to, from what I remember, he tends to really chase that submission before he has to take a solid position. So sometimes he would get like reversed. I remember in some of his earlier fights that would happen, but it looked like in this fight he was more, focused on maintaining that dominant position to get that ground and pound off. So I think that's a new wrinkle in his game, or maybe just an evolving wrinkle in his game that he's shown. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see him against Joshua Van or even Kyoji Horiguchi, as we mentioned him as well. And just really quick on Kyoji, I'm really excited to see what he can do in the UFC. I know that he's also 35 years old, and he used to be in the UFC. He went overseas and went back to Ryzen and pretty much dominated all of Japanese MMA out there at 135 as well. And he was kind of like the gatekeeper for Japan, for like Japanese fighters or for regional fighters before they go into the UFC. And they would have to pretty much beat him in order to, get called up to the UFC, like Manel Kape and Tai Asakura. But to see him back in the UFC, it's like, oh, maybe he can make some sort of miracle run here. And if he stays healthy, because I know that his first fight, he had to pull out of because of injury. But they rebooked it, and he recently got that wild submission over Said Nurmagomedov, who's like a stud. I know that people like to say that, Khabib and the rest of the camp, they like to, berate Saeed because sometimes he doesn't listen, but he is still a really good prospect. And for Kyoji Horiguchi at 35 years old to do what he did to him there, it kind of shows that, the flyweight division is still really stacked. Um, and yeah, and you got other dudes like Asu Amabayev, guy from Kazakhstan, the Central Asians, the Asians, they're out here, putting in work for the flyweight division. And all the fights are super entertaining. They all have great skills. Like Jessica said, they're like really good at grappling. They can control the back. Just these skills that, they kind of diminish as the weight classes go up. So I'm really excited to see how that division plays out. It would be really nice if Alexandre Pantoja was healthy and we could see how he would deal with these kind of surging newcomers. But, it'll still be enjoyable to watch, I think, especially for hardcore fans.
And now let's talk about one last fight. Let's talk about Henry Cejudo's swan song against Peyton Talbot. Henry Cejudo really made his mark not at bantamweight, but at flyweight. And then he took a lot of time off after he was a double champion. And then he came back and he just wasn't the same Henry Cejudo because he took a lot of time off. He was older and he came back to a division that he didn't dominate. So when he came back, he just looked really small for bantamweight. So with that in mind, with Henry coming into this knowing this is going to be his last fight, Michael, what did you think about his performance?
It was really gutsy. I'm going to be real with you. I was never really the biggest Henry Cejudo fan. Not just like for his, his persona or his like out of ring personality, but I also just wasn't huge into his actual fight style. I know that he tried to like implement karate a lot and he kind of tried to create this like sort of collisions when he would fight and he would really time those really well. But I thought for this fight, it was pretty noble for him to go out on his shield kind of and take a lot of damage more than what was necessary. Obviously he wanted to, put on a show for his last performance and I can't really hate on that too much. Yeah, I was more impressed with, Peyton Talbot's ability to take him down a couple times and, put on kind of a striking clinic against Cejudo. Because I don't, and you two might know more than me, but I don't remember anyone really styling on Cejudo like that. Like I even remember during the Cejudo's fight with Song Yadong that Song was having some trouble towards the end before like he eye poked Cejudo. So I don't know if you guys have any more insight on that, but it was really impressive on Peyton Talbot's part, in my opinion. But yeah, shout out to Cejudo and have a good post UFC career.
Yeah, to your point about his karate style, which he adopted before he made his title run, he made some style changes and that helped him become a champion, one of which was incorporating karate. But in this fight, he didn't fight like a karate guy. He fought just kind of more like a brawler. And I think it's because that style requires so much speed and athleticism and frankly, like a lighter body that he didn't have anymore.
I noticed that Cejudo had like tape on his like feet. You can kind of see them peeking through his like ankle support wraps. And I asked Sam if like Cejudo like regularly wore those, and he said no. Maybe it was like his first time wearing them. So it's kind of clear that his like age and his athletic ability just like diminished, and kind of just made him like very like hittable. Yeah, I think I noticed that like Talbot kept his hands super low, but like his hands like down is like the exact level of Cejudo's face. So he kind of just threw his hands forward and it just hit Cejudo. And with his size, it hit him in the face pretty hard.
Yeah, I think Cejudo just has a lot of miles on him. Kind of what I was saying about Pantoja, just body's probably breaking down, especially making those Olympic runs. He notoriously like rolls his ankles during fights. He once had to jump out of a burning building from the second floor, and he like really messed up his like ankles and his feet. And this was years ago, but it's like all of that accumulated. I mean, credit to Talbot for taking him down, outstriking him. But part of what made Cejudo so good was like his ability to bounce and explode in. And I don't think he has those ankles anymore. I don't think he has those knees. I think he just has to just kind of stand his ground and just swing and hope to get a knockout. And even then, because of who he is, he kind of like makes that work enough where it's successful. So even as limited as he is, he can still put up a fight, but nowhere near the same fighter that he once was. I think it's age and injuries. And then also Peyton Talbot is really good. And he's also very big and long for the division. Because of that, where they're meeting in their careers, Cejudo became kind of a punching bag.
His credit, he tried to turn it into a war. And, my theory is he's trying to get that fight of the night bonus before he pieces out of there, So, I mean, can't hate on him trying to get some money.
Jessica, do you have any other thoughts?
Like he had that like karate kind of a stance where you kind of need to keep your kind of like your chin up and your kind of hands a little bit low. It just like helps with like your standard balance for that kind of like footwork you want to do. But then you don't have footwork, then you just have your chin out and swing in the pocket is just ready for Talbot to just take. So
yeah,
he would have to like totally change his stance and style to deal with that. Like probably like his lack of footwork.
I sometimes wonder what kind of career he would have had if he never retired when he did. Because by the time he tried to come back from that retirement if he didn't leave, that's probably when he would have actually retired. But Olympic champion, flyweight champion, bantamweight champion. Also, he beat Demetrius Johnson, who during that run also seemed like a fighter you just couldn't beat. And Cejudo did it. So he still had an incredible career. Talbot, though, he has his whole career ahead of him. Only 27, and beating Cejudo, that's like a big name, because at 27, you don't want to fight 5 years to get a title shot. 27 is young, but young is relative to where you are in the rankings and how far you are from the title shot. 27 is very old if you're unranked and trying to work your way up the UFC ladder, because then you're banking on being in your peak at the fastest division in your 30s. So that's going to be tough. So, yeah, we see Cejudo go. We get to watch Talbot hopefully go up from here.
I'm a Talbot fan because I didn't really know what MMA was like in the early 2000s. And I know you've talked about it, but there was some sort of like kind of an alternative culture to it. And I think Talbot might be sort of that type of throwback. I just find him really fascinating in that sense. I don't know if he's a chud or not, but I just know that he's like not overtly toxic like a lot of MMA fighters can be. And I know that he's also talked about like being really passionate about his art and like DJing. He's like really into like making these wild YouTube videos that are like really cryptic and vague. I don't know if you've ever watched them. Maybe I'll send something in the chat later, but they're really interesting. And like, I think he said that he wants to be more than just a fighter, or he like thinks of himself as someone more than just a fighter. And I think that's like a really healthy way to approach that wild career. It's like, maybe don't put all your eggs in that basket, especially if, the pay isn't like amazing. So, he's like super passionate about things outside of fighting. And I think that's really healthy.
Well, I guess if like Talbot's a chud, but I think I know he like trains in Orange County. So kind of the people he trains with or his gym is very much a lot of chuds there. But I don't know, maybe he's a closet liberal. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think if you're an MMA fighter, it's hard to not be around chuds.
For sure.
And to Michael's point, yeah, when MMA first started, it was kind of this subculture, this counterculture. And now it's not really a counterculture anymore. It's very much
going to be in the White House.
Yeah, mainline conservative culture.
Yeah.
So to your point then, Talbot is a throwback because he's very counterculture to the rest of what MMA is like. he's somebody like I've noticed like not MMA media cover so much, but like regular mainstream media cover as somebody who's like counterculture to MMA. There's more write-ups about him in like mainstream publications than there are in MMA publications. So
It's his like pseudo relationship with Frank Ocean, maybe. It's like people are really interested in, and like they're like, oh, who's this UFC fighter? And he like knows all these cool artsy people, and like, I think that's a better look for MMA, especially for MMA fans, like they're not all super mega chuds that love Donald Trump walking in, walking in through to the stadium, and some of us are like kind of weird and, maybe a little more chill than people give us credit for, but yeah.
yeah, hopefully we don't see Talbot like walking out of the cage and trying to shake Donald Trump's hand or something. But like you said, it's MMA. Like we said about every fight, anything could happen.
Anything could happen.
You could slip on a banana peel. You could say all these things about whatever that seems like very social justice oriented, and then like go shake Donald Trump's hand. Yeah, nothing is going to be consistent. It's all mixing of random incoherent things.
Yeah.
Mixing of mental gymnastics sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael, for joining us today. Thank you, Jessica, once again. This was Fight Study. Thank you all for listening. Catch you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this episode and like what we do, support us on Patreon. We also have the Liberation Martial Arts program if you want to train with us from wherever you are. What you're learning is how to teach yourself. It's also an approach you can take with you into the world. Sponsors get a monthly training session with me, either in person or online. You can also sponsor the training of an organizer instead, or support our training organizer program or me directly. Find all our links at southpawpod.com.